Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, part 1 of chapter 7 of Ibn Arabi's Fusus al-Hikam. Here, Ibn Arabi is examining the wisdom of the Prophet Ismail. In this video, we're going to be having an overview. In the following, we're going to be having a deep dive. He starts the chapter saying that that what we call Allah, what we call God, is in his essence one and absolutely beyond multiplicity. And he, consider it this way, he contains all those names, but at the same time he transcends them. Essentially, there is no name anymore. There is not a distinction between names. He has, Ibn Arabi is going to tell us, he has all names in potentiality in the essence. And when the first emanation starts, those potentialities find actuality first in his knowledge, then in the corporeal world. That's what he means here. And there's not a created being who does not have a share from a Lord. Here, we should put this in the context of Ibn Arabi's thought and what's going to come in this chapter. According to Ibn Arabi, everything in the world is a manifestation of a particular divine name or a combination of names. So in this framework, each name is a Lord, each divine name is a Lord for every created entity. And it is impossible, says Ibn Arabi, that someone like normal humans or other entities have all names as their lords. And understanding again in the context of other chapters, especially his commentaries, there's only one person per age who has the capacity to be nurtured by the entirety of divine names at the same time. That capacity is exclusively that of the perfect man of each age, according to Ibn Arabi. In the stage of oneness, that ahadiyya, absolute transcendental oneness, there is no plurality, he says, and no being can witness then that absolute transcendence, because he's going to elaborate, because seeing means duality, and in the absolute essence there is no such duality. So in that oneness there is no division. The stage of oneness is absolute essence, who has all the divine names and potentiality. That is literally the beginning of the chapter. Instead of starting our textual analysis, it's better to go with an overview to understand what is going on here. In every chapter, Ibn Arabi takes one or two Quranic verses related to each particular prophet that chapter is dedicated to, and interprets those verses, including his own perspectives. Now, in the Quran, chapter named Maryam, that is Mary, Virgin Mary, verses 54 to 55, describe Ismail as one who is faithful to his promise. And it adds that God is pleased with Ismail. Ibn Arabi starts from this Quranic text and tries to understand and explain what is going on here. What does it mean for the Lord to be pleased by the servant? And can the servant be pleased with the Lord? What would that mean? If the Lord is pleased with me, the Lord here in technical sense, a particular divine name that is nurturing me, if that Lord is content with me, does that mean that other lords, other names are also content with me? Asks Ibn Arabi. Two Quranic terms in Arabic that are central to this chapter are wa'd and wa'id. Wa'd means a positive promise. You do something, God says, I will give you such and such in the hereafter. Wa'id is right the opposite. Should you do such and such, I will send you to hell. So Ibn Arabi is going to examine these two words in relation to Ismail. Although while you're reading, initially it will not come up in the chapter, but this chapter concerns also the relationship between the creator and the created, especially human being. The distinction and sharedness of the servant and the Lord. The commentators, Muhammad Ali Muwahhid and Samad Muwahhid, have explained this part of the text beautifully. According to them, in Ibn Arabi's framework, the real, that is the absolute essence, communicates and connects with the creation through his names, and the created connect with God again through those names. But consider those names as having two aspects. The about aspect, the upper aspect, consider them as intelligible forms of divine names in God's knowledge, and the aspect that is concentrated on creation, that is looking towards creation, what Ibn Arabi calls fixed entities. So fixed entities and divine names are basically the same thing in technical sense. So God communicates with the created through his names, and the created communicate with God, connect to the essence through those fixed entities, which are the other side of the coin. And in other words, Muwahhid says, the created is the act of God. The created beings are the acts of God. And every entity, every being, relates to the essence through a particular name. Put differently, the real communicates with each created entity. The real communicates with his acts through one particular name. Therefore, each name takes the lordship of each human being or of each entity in creation. It is in this sense that the Quran, says Ibn Arabi, talks about the Lord's being pleased with Ismail. The Lord, the name that was nurturing Ismail, was pleased with him because that name was dominating Ismail and he was responding well. He was cooperating. He was being nurtured as the Lord had expected. According to Qayṣarī, lordship is a secret, and if the secret vanishes, lordship vanishes as well. That's a very enigmatic text. And Ibn Arabi says, look, he was right. What he's saying is, servanthood is that secret, meaning that for a name to be Lord, there must be a servant. In practice, we have discussed it many times. We're not talking about the divine essence. The divine essence in its absolute stage is absolutely transcendent. We are talking about the relational dimension of the essence, that is the divine names. If there is no servant, Lord would lose its meaning. What or whom is Lord going to nurture in practice? Therefore, according to Quran, for Ibn Arabi, when the Lord is content, pleased with Ismail, that is not exclusive to Ismail, that relates to everyone. The distinction between Ismail and me, for example, is that he was aware of that secret. He was aware that he stands in that ismos, in that barzakh. We're going to see what that means. Ibn Arabi emphasizes that divine names are infinite, therefore divine manifestations are infinite. And given that he said that every entity is being nurtured by a Lord, by a name, if that Lord is pleased, if that Lord is content by that entity or that by that being, it doesn't mean that other names, other lords are also pleased. You are satisfying one name. Do not think that it is absolute. There is only one person in each age who has the capacity to receive the entirety of divine manifestations, who has the capacity, the aptitude to make all divine names pleased, meaning that only the perfect man of each age, Insan Kamil in its Ibn Arabian sense, has the aptitude to embody all divine names. Only he has the capacity to embody God most comprehensively. We are doing it partially. That bird, the sky, clouds, that tree, the beautiful tree behind me. We all manifest only partial beauties and embodiments of divine names. We're going to see this in other chapters, and we have somehow seen it before. The name that takes the lordship of an entity, of human, let's say, takes the lordship of the reality of that person. That is technically fixed entity. So the Lord communicates with the fixed entity of me as a person. The name is nurturing me through my reality and bestows what my reality necessitates and asks. And I, as a person, participate in my reality. What I just said is a technical thing we have discussed, and we're gonna discuss it later. The focus is not on that, but I, as a person, participate as much as I can in my reality, in the aptitude latent in my reality, bringing those capacities into actuality. If you remember, Ibn Arabi said before that sometimes I ask God, saying, God, give me such and such. Sometimes I don't use words, I don't do it verbally, but my states, the states that I'm in, shows God what I want, shows God that I want. But the strongest plea is in my reality. My reality, by its aptitude, asks God what my capacities are and what I want. Even if Ibn Arabi said that I verbally do not acknowledge that, even if I verbally say, God, I want such and such, but my reality wants something else. And given that that is the stronger request, God goes with that. I deliberately skipped an important part of this chapter, the part about the divine promises of reward and punishment, because the discussion there is much nuanced, and it can be misunderstood very easily. So we will be discussing them only in our courses. I will stop here. In next video, we're going to have the textual analysis. I didn't read much from the text itself. I just gave you an overview. Read the text before we start analyzing the text based on what I have explained, and come to next episode prepared so that we can have a deeper analysis. Thanks for watching.